Commander Deho stared at the blue planet through the observation window of his patrol vessel. 250 years. That was how long the Galactic Assembly had been watching Earth, and in all that time, the humans had never said a single word. He found it strange. Most species couldn't wait to join the galactic community. They sent signals, they built monuments, they tried everything possible to get attention, but not humans. They just stayed quiet and destroyed anything that came too close to their world. Deho remembered the stories his instructors told him at the military academy. 17 exploration ships had been lost trying to make contact with Earth. Good ships with good crews, all gone in flashes of light when they crossed some invisible line near the human moon. After that, the Assembly had declared Earth a restricted zone. Nobody was allowed to go near it anymore.
Still looking at the quiet world?
His second officer asked, floating over to join him. She was a Thalari, with skin that changed colors based on her mood. Right now it was a curious orange. Just thinking, Deho replied. What kind of species stays completely silent for 2.5 centuries? Maybe they're afraid, she suggested. Or maybe they just don't like visitors. Deho shook his head. Fear didn't explain it. The Assembly had sent peaceful messages in every language and format imaginable. They had transmitted mathematics, music, and images of friendship. Nothing worked. Earth's answer was always the same, silence. Across the galaxy in the grand halls of Axis Prime, Ambassador Hiyori was having a similar conversation. She stood before the High Council, requesting permission to make another attempt at contact with Earth. Ambassador, we've tried this 847 times, Counselor Velas said tiredly. He was old even by his species standards, having served on the Council for 3 centuries. The humans have made their position clear. They want nothing to do with us. With respect, Counselor, they haven't made any position clear, Hiyori argued. They've simply stayed quiet. That's not the same as refusing contact. They destroy our probes, another counselor pointed out. Only the ones that enter their defensive perimeter, Hiyori countered. They've never attacked anything outside their solar system. They've never threatened anyone. They just want to be left alone. Then perhaps we should honor that wish, Velas said firmly. Motion denied, Ambassador. Earth remains restricted. Hiyori bowed and left the chamber, frustrated but not surprised. The Assembly had grown comfortable with Earth's silence. It had become normal, a strange mystery that nobody really wanted to solve anymore. In her laboratory on Axis Prime, Dr. Bora was studying the old survey data from Earth's discovery. She was a xenobiologist, someone who studied alien life, and the human case fascinated her. Every scan they had managed to complete before losing contact showed something unusual. Human cities were organized in ways that made no sense. Their infrastructure followed patterns that seemed inefficient by galactic standards. They used materials and energy sources that were primitive compared to Assembly technology. And yet something about it all felt deliberate, like they were hiding their true capabilities. Bora pulled up a file marked Confidential Earth Final Assessment Year 2297. It was the last report filed before Earth was quarantined. She had read it 100 times, but one section always caught her attention. Warning: human defensive response shows technological sophistication inconsistent with observed civilization level. Recommend extreme caution. Species may be deliberately concealing advancement stage. She leaned back in her chair and thought about that. What if the humans weren't primitive? What if they were pretending to be? But why would anyone do that? Her computer chimed. Incoming priority message from the Kepler sector. Bora opened it and felt her blood run cold. Emergency distress signal. Colony World Kepler 442b under attack. Unknown hostile force. Requesting immediate assistance. Casualties in the millions. Please help. The message repeated over and over. Attached were sensor readings that made Bora's hands shake. She had seen these readings before in historical archives. The Vrek swarm. A parasitic species that consumed entire civilizations and converted them into more of themselves. They hadn't been seen in this part of the galaxy for 1,000 years. She forwarded the message to the High Council and started pulling up everything the Assembly knew about the Vreks. It wasn't good. The last time they had appeared, it took the combined might of 200 species to drive them back. Billions had died. Within hours, the Assembly mobilized its fleets. Thousands of ships from hundreds of worlds converged on the Kepler sector. Commander Deho's patrol vessel was called back from Earth's perimeter to join the relief force. As they traveled through jump space toward Kepler 442b, Deho studied the tactical reports. The Vreks had hit fast and hard. The colony's defenses had lasted less than an hour. Now the swarm was spreading across the planet, consuming everything. Estimated time to arrival, 6 days, his navigator reported. Deho closed his eyes. 6 days. How many people would die in 6 days? Ambassador Hiyori was aboard the flagship of the relief fleet. She stood on the bridge, watching the jump timer count down, feeling helpless. The High Council had ordered her to document everything for the historical record. A diplomatic observer to witness what might be the beginning of another Vrex war. Dr. Bora was there too, reviewing biological data on the Vrex, trying to find any weakness that might help. But she knew the truth. The Vrex didn't have weaknesses. They adapted to every weapon, learned from every tactic, and never stopped growing. On the 3rd day of their journey, something impossible happened. Every ship in the fleet received the same transmission simultaneously. It came from Earth. The planet that had been silent for 250 years was suddenly broadcasting across all frequencies. The message was simple, delivered in perfect galactic standard. The voice was human, calm and confident. "We heard you. We're coming." The bridge fell silent. Ambassador Hiyori grabbed the communications console. "Earth vessel, this is Ambassador Hiyori of the Galactic Assembly. Please confirm your message. Are you saying you're responding to the Kepler distress signal?" There was a pause. Then the human voice replied, "Confirmed, Ambassador. We've been listening to your communications for a long time. We know what the Vrex are. We know what they do, and we're not going to let them destroy your people. But Kepler 442b is 18 light years from your position," Hiyori said, confused. "It will take you weeks to arrive, even with jump drives." "We'll be there in 4 hours," the voice said. "Earth fleet out." The transmission ended. Hiyori looked at Commander Deho, who had joined her on the flagship. His face showed the same shock she felt. 4 hours? He whispered. "That's impossible. No jump drive can move that fast." Here he pulled up the star charts. Earth was on the opposite side of the galaxy from Kepler. Even if the humans had somehow developed faster jump technology, 4 hours was beyond impossible. It broke every known law of physics. Dr. Bora arrived on the bridge, her tablet showing frantic calculations. "I've been running the numbers. If they arrive in 4 hours from where Earth is located, they're traveling at speeds that would require technology at least 5,000 years more advanced than ours." "That can't be right," Deho said. "We surveyed Earth. They were barely spacefaring when we found them." 250 years ago, Bora reminded him. "What if they've been busy?" Ambassador Hiyori sat down slowly. 2.5 centuries of silence. 2.5 centuries while the Assembly assumed Earth was primitive or afraid or simply uninterested. What had the humans been doing all that time? She had a feeling they were about to find out. And somehow she knew that when they did, everything was going to change. The human fleet arrived exactly 4 hours after their transmission ended. Commander Deho was staring at his sensors when they appeared, and for a moment he thought his equipment was malfunctioning. Ships didn't just materialize out of nowhere, but that's exactly what the human vessels did. One moment space was empty. The next moment, 12 ships hung in orbit around Kepler 442b. No jump flare, no displacement wave, no energy signature at all. They were just suddenly there. "What kind of drive system is that?" Deho's navigator whispered. Nobody answered because nobody knew. The human ships were strange looking. They didn't follow the standard designs used by assembly species. No elegant curves or symmetrical structures. Instead, they looked functional, almost brutal in their simplicity. Dark metal hulls covered in what looked like geometric patterns. Deho's computer identified them as some kind of advanced armor, but couldn't analyze the composition. One ship was larger than the others. It broadcast an identification code. UES Indomitable, flagship of Earth's Expeditionary Force. The commander was listed as Admiral Samin. Ambassador Hiyori immediately opened a communication channel. "Human vessels, this is the Galactic Assembly Relief Fleet. We're 3 days out from your position. Please hold defensive posture until we arrive to coordinate our assault." The response came from Admiral Soman herself. Her image appeared on the view screen. She was a human woman who looked to be in her middle years, with dark hair pulled back and eyes that seemed to measure everything they saw. She wore a simple uniform without decorations. "Ambassador Hiyori, we've reviewed the tactical situation. 3 days is too long. The Vrex will have consumed the entire colony population by then. We're engaging immediately." Admiral, I appreciate your urgency, but you have 12 ships. Our fleet has 3,000 vessels. Perhaps you should wait for backup. Admiral Soman's expression didn't change. With respect, Ambassador, your fleet uses conventional weapons that the Vrex have adapted to resist. We don't. Please maintain your current position and observe. We'll have this handled within 6 hours. The channel closed before Hiyori could respond. Did she just tell the entire assembly fleet to stay out of her way? Commander Deho asked in disbelief. Yes, Hiyori said slowly. Yes, she did. On the surface of Kepler 442b, the Vrex swarm was spreading across continents. They looked like a mix of insect and machine, each creature connected to the others through a collective mind. They consumed everything organic and used it to create more of themselves. Entire cities were being dissolved and rebuilt as hive structures. The colony's last defense forces were making a final stand outside the capital. 5,000 soldiers with whatever weapons they had left facing a swarm of millions. They knew they were going to die. They just wanted to buy time for a few more civilians to evacuate. Captain Minho commanded the ground assault. His transport ship descended through the atmosphere with 11 others, escorted by small fighter craft that moved like nothing the assembly had ever built. They were fast, impossibly fast, making turns that should have killed their pilots. The Virex noticed the human ships and sent flying variants to intercept, thousands of them filling the sky like a dark cloud. The assembly soldiers on the ground watched, expecting to see the human vessels destroyed. Instead, the human fighters did something that seemed to break reality itself. They flickered, existing in multiple positions at once, and the Vrex swarm simply fell out of the sky. No weapons fire, no explosions. The Vrex just stopped flying and dropped to the ground dead. What was that? The assembly ground commander broadcasted on the open channel. A human pilot named Hyon responded. His voice was young and calm. Temporal disruption field. We shifted them a few microseconds out of sync with normal time. Their nervous systems couldn't handle the transition. The assembly commander had no idea what that meant, but he watched as the human transports landed and deployed troops. There were only about 500 human soldiers total. They wore armor that seemed to flow like liquid metal and carried weapons that looked deceptively simple. The Vrex swarm charged at them, millions of creatures moving as one coordinated force. The human soldiers didn't retreat. They didn't even look concerned. They formed a defensive line and opened fire. The weapons made a sound like thunder and reality breaking at the same time. Where the beams struck, Vrex didn't just die. They ceased to exist. No bodies, no remains, just empty space where they had been a moment before. Causality cannons, Captain Minho explained over the radio. They don't destroy targets. They remove the probability of their existence from this timeline. The Vrex kept attacking. Their collective intelligence calculated new strategies, tried to adapt, sent wave after wave of creatures. Nothing worked. The human defensive line held absolutely, and every Vrex that reached it simply stopped existing. In orbit, Admiral Soman was directing the space battle from the Indomitable. The remaining human ships had surrounded the planet and were deploying what looked like satellites. Commander Deho watched from his observation position with the assembly fleet. What are those? He asked Dr. Bora, who was monitoring everything with scientific fascination and horror. I think they're creating some kind of field around the planet, she said, studying her readings. The energy signature is... It's converting matter at the quantum level. Oh no, they're not what? Hiyori demanded. They're building a cage, Bora whispered. A prison made of folded space. Nothing can get in or out without their permission. As soon as the field was complete, Admiral Soman sent a message to the Virex. Somehow the humans could communicate directly with the swarm's collective mind. Vrex Overmind. This is Admiral Soman of Earth. You have one opportunity to surrender. Gather your forces and submit to containment, or we will eradicate every single one of you. You have 10 minutes to comply. The Vrex response was to attack harder. They didn't understand surrender. They only understood consumption and growth. Admiral Samin nodded as if she had expected that answer. Very well. All ships activate matter state inverters. The human vessels fired beams that looked like focused starlight. Where the beams touched Vrex swarms on the planet's surface, something impossible happened. The creatures began moving backward through time, getting smaller, returning to the organic matter they had consumed. Within minutes, entire continents were cleared. The Vrex were being unmade, but Admiral Soman didn't stop there. Her ships targeted the Vrex vessels in orbit, the ones that had brought the swarm to this world. There were hundreds of the bioships, each one large enough to carry millions of creatures. The human weapons fired once. Every wreck ship vanished, not destroyed, not scattered, simply gone, as if they had never existed. The whole battle lasted 5 hours and 43 minutes. When it was over, Kepler 442b was free. The wreck swarm was completely eliminated. The colony's survivors stood in shocked silence, unable to process what they had witnessed. Captain Minho's forces had lost no soldiers. The human ships had taken no damage. They had faced an enemy that had historically required the combined might of hundreds of species to defeat, and they had erased it from existence like it was nothing. The assembly fleet arrived 2 days later to find the planet already secured. Human forces were helping with reconstruction, providing medical aid and distributing supplies. They were efficient, professional, and completely terrifying in their capabilities. Ambassador Hayori requested a meeting aboard the Indomitable. Admiral Soman agreed and sent a shuttle to collect her, Commander Deho and Dr. Bora. The interior of the human flagship was as functional as its exterior. Clean corridors, minimal decoration, everything designed for purpose rather than aesthetics. They were escorted to a conference room where Admiral Soman and Captain Minho waited. "Thank you for seeing us," Hayori began carefully. "What you did here was incredible. You saved billions of lives." "That was the goal," Admiral Soman replied simply. "I don't mean to seem ungrateful," Hayori continued, "but I must ask. The technology you displayed today is far beyond anything we've ever seen. Your ships move faster than should be possible. Your weapons operate on principles we don't understand. How did Earth develop such capabilities?" Admiral Soman exchanged a glance with Captain Minho. Something passed between them, some silent communication. Then she looked back at the ambassador. "We had time," she said. 250 years of uninterrupted research and development. We dedicated every resource our civilization had to advancing our technology. We needed to know that when we finally spoke to the galaxy, we could do so from a position where nobody could threaten our survival. "You've been preparing for war?" Deho asked quietly. "We've been preparing to prevent war," Captain Minho corrected. "There's a difference. We studied your history, Ambassador. We know what happens to species that enter the galactic stage before they're ready. Some are exploited, some are conquered, some are simply erased because others fear their potential. We decided that would never happen to Earth." "So you built weapons that can unmake matter itself?" Bora asked. "That can manipulate time and probability? That can communicate with collective intelligences and fold space?" "We built the capability to defend ourselves and others," Admiral Soman said. "What you saw today was us choosing to use that capability to help." Ambassador Hayori felt a chill run through her. The emergency session of the Galactic Council was the most heavily attended in history. Representatives from all 847 member species crowded into the Grand Chamber on Axis Prime. Ambassador Hayori stood at the center platform, preparing to present her report on the human intervention at Kepler 442b. But the humans had requested to speak first. High Archon Velis had agreed, though many counselors objected. Now everyone waited to hear what Earth had to say. Director Yunji entered the chamber with Counselor Ji-won. They were the official representatives of Earth's government. Yunji was an older woman with gray in her hair and eyes that had seen much. Ji-won was younger, trained in something she called interspecies psychology. They walked calmly to the speaker's platform, showing no sign of nervousness despite the thousands of eyes watching them. "Honored members of the Galactic Assembly," Director Yunji began. "My name is Director Yunji of Earth's Historical Preservation Committee. I'm here to tell you the truth about my species and why we remained silent for 250 years. Some of what I'm about to reveal will be difficult to hear. I ask only that you listen to everything before making your judgment." She activated a holographic display that filled the air above the chamber. It showed Earth as it appeared in 2297, the year the Assembly first discovered it. "When your survey ships found Earth, we already knew you were there. We had been listening to your transmissions for 30 years. We had quantum entanglement receivers that could pick up communications across the galaxy. We studied your languages, your cultures, your history. We learned everything we could about the Galactic Assembly." Murmurs spread through the chamber. Several counselors looked shocked. The humans had been spying on them for decades before first contact. "We learned many wonderful things," Yunji continued. "We saw species working together in peace. We saw technologies that could cure diseases and extend life. We saw a civilization that had survived for millennia, but we also learned something that frightened us. The hologram changed to show a timeline of galactic history. We found records of 237 species that had been discovered by the Assembly in the last 1,000 years. We studied what happened to each of them. 43 species were absorbed into larger civilizations and lost their independence. 67 were restricted to their home systems because they were deemed too aggressive or unstable. 12 were completely destroyed by other species who feared their rapid advancement. The chamber fell silent. Many counselors shifted uncomfortably. These were uncomfortable truths that most preferred not to discuss. We calculated our own advancement curve, Yunji said. Human technology was progressing exponentially, much faster than any species in the Assembly had developed. If we revealed ourselves in 2297, we would have been more advanced than 90% of galactic civilizations within a century. Within 2 centuries, we would have surpassed everyone. Counselor Ji-won stepped forward to continue the presentation. Our psychologists analyzed historical patterns. Species that advanced too quickly were always seen as threats. Coalitions formed against them. Wars started. We ran simulations of what would happen if we joined the Assembly, while still developing rapidly. In 87% of scenarios, the result was conflict within 50 years. So you hid, High Archon Velis said. His voice was hard to read. You chose isolation over integration. We chose preparation over premature contact, Yoonji corrected gently. We made a decision as a species. We would not reveal ourselves until we were ready. And by ready, we meant ready to defend our sovereignty against any threat, including the entire Galactic Assembly if necessary. The chamber erupted in angry voices. Several species demanded that the humans be removed immediately. Others called for military action against Earth. Ambassador Hayori watched it all with a sinking feeling in her stomach. Director Yoonji waited for the noise to die down. When she spoke again, her voice was firm. I understand your anger. You feel deceived. You feel threatened. But consider what we actually did. For 250 years, we never attacked anyone. We never expanded beyond our solar system. We never threatened any assembly world. We simply wanted to be left alone until we were ready to meet you as equals. Equals? One counselor shouted. You showed technology at Kepler that makes us look like primitives. You don't want to be equals. You want to be superior. No, Counselor Ji-won said firmly. Superior means wanting to rule over others. We don't want that. We want to ensure that nobody can rule over us. There's a difference. Dr. Bora stood from her seat in the observer section. As a respected scientist, she had the right to speak. If I may, honorable counselors, I've reviewed all the data from the Kepler incident. The humans could have arrived days earlier if they wanted. They could have ignored our distress signal entirely. Instead, they came to help, and they did so without asking for anything in return. They saved billions of Assembly citizens and revealed themselves in the process, another counselor noted. Perhaps they helped only to show us their power, to make us afraid. If we wanted you afraid, we would have done things very differently, Director Yoonji said quietly. We could have arrived at Axis Prime with a fleet of warships. We could have made demands. We could have threatened. Instead, we sent 2 diplomatic representatives to explain ourselves honestly. She changed the holographic display again. It now showed Earth's solar system, but different than the Assembly's old survey data. The moon was revealed as a massive weapons platform. Mars had been converted into a shipyard. The asteroid belt was now a network of defensive stations. Venus was covered in research facilities. Even the outer planets had been modified, turned into resource processing centers and training grounds. This is what we've been doing for 250 years, Yoonji said. We turned our entire solar system into the most advanced research and development project in galactic history. Every human on Earth dedicated themselves to this goal. We sacrificed expansion. We sacrificed contact. We sacrificed the chance to explore the galaxy. Also that when we finally spoke to you, we could do so with the confidence that our future was in our own hands. Show them the rest, Ambassador Hayori said suddenly. She had been silent until now, but something in Yoonji's presentation had sparked a realization. Show them what else you built. Director Yoonji looked at her carefully. Are you sure, Ambassador? Once I show this, there's no going back. Show them, Hayori insisted. They need to understand the full picture. Yoonji nodded and changed the display once more. Now it showed a massive structure floating in space. larger than any ship or station the assembly had ever built. It looked like a ring of light surrounding what appeared to be folded space. "This is Project Sanctuary," Yunji explained. "It's a dimensional shelter network. In the event of an existential threat to galactic civilization, we can evacuate every sentient being in the assembly to a parallel dimension where they'll be safe. The entire population of your 847 species. We've been building it for 200 years. The chamber fell into stunned silence. "You built a shelter for us?" Velis asked slowly. "For species you've never even met?" "We listened to your transmissions," Counselor G1 said softly. "We heard your music, your stories, your dreams. We learned about your cultures and your histories. And we realized that even though you might see us as a threat, we couldn't see you the same way. You were neighbors we hadn't met yet, and we don't abandon neighbors in need." Dr. Bora was running calculations on her tablet. The energy requirements for something like this, you would have needed to harness the full output of your sun, and the technology to fold dimensions. That's theoretical even in our most advanced research facilities. "We had motivation," Yunji said simply. "We studied your history and saw the pattern. Every few thousand years, something threatens galactic civilization. The Vrex, the Cascade Wars, the Entropy Wave, events that kill trillions and set progress back by centuries. We decided that the next time something like that happened, there should be a backup plan, a way to save everyone." "Why?" Velis demanded. "Why would you care what happens to species you've never spoken to?" "Because we're not monsters," Yunji said. "We're just careful. There's a difference between wanting to protect yourself and wanting to harm others. We chose isolation because we feared conflict, not because we hated you. And we spent those 250 years building not just weapons but solutions. Not just defenses but shelters. Not just ways to fight but ways to save." Commander Deho stood from his position. "The Varex invasion. You said the main fleet is coming in 6 months. You've known about this for how long?" 18 months, Yunji admitted. "We've been tracking them since they entered the Outer Rim." "And you said nothing," a counselor accused. "We were waiting to see how you handled the scouting force," Counselor G1 explained. "We needed to understand your capabilities, your strategies, your willingness to work together under pressure. We needed to know if you were ready to face what's coming." "That's not your decision to make," several voices shouted. "You're right," Yunji agreed. "Which is why we're here now. We're not claiming authority over the assembly. We're offering partnership. We have information about the Vrex fleet. We have technology that can fight them. We have strategies that can minimize casualties. And yes, we have Project Sanctuary if everything goes wrong." The war room on Axis Prime had never been so crowded. Representatives from hundreds of species filled the massive chamber, all trying to coordinate the defense against the coming Vrex invasion. At the center of it all stood General Tajin, Earth's chief military strategist, calmly organizing the chaos. Commander Daiho watched him work with a mix of admiration and unease. In just 3 weeks, Tajin had restructured the entire assembly defense network. He had identified weaknesses in their formations, inefficiencies in their supply lines, and gaps in their sensor coverage. More importantly, he had fixed them all. But many species weren't happy about taking orders from humans. Daiho could hear the complaints around him. Some admirals muttered about Earth's arrogance. Others questioned whether humanity really understood galactic warfare. A few openly suggested that the humans were using the Vrex threat to seize military control. Tajin seemed unbothered by it all. He stood at the holographic display showing the predicted Vrex approach routes and explained his defensive strategy in simple terms. "They'll hit the outer colonies first, testing our response. We need to make them think we're using conventional tactics, so they adapt to the wrong defenses. Then when they commit to their main assault on the core worlds, we reveal the human technology." "You want us to sacrifice the outer colonies?" one admiral demanded. "No," Tajin said firmly. "I want you to evacuate them. We have 6 months. That's enough time to move every civilian from the predicted attack zones to safer locations. The colonies themselves are replaceable. The people aren't. Evacuating 50 colonies will take enormous resources," another commander argued. "It could weaken our defensive preparations." "Not if we do it efficiently," Admiral Soman said. She had joined the war room from the human flagship still in orbit. "Earth will provide transport ships and dimensional shelter access for any species that needs it. We can move 1 billion people per week if necessary." Ambassador Hayori spoke up from her position as civilian liaison. "The Council has authorized the evacuation, General Tajin's plan has been approved. We begin implementing it tomorrow. Grumbling continued, but orders were orders. The massive evacuation operation began the next day. Human transport ships appeared at dozens of colony worlds, working alongside assembly vessels to move populations to safety. It was the largest coordinated action in galactic history. Commander Deho was assigned as a liaison officer to the human forces. He spent his days aboard various Earth vessels, learning how they operated. What he discovered both impressed and disturbed him. The humans had protocols for everything, backup plans for every scenario, and a level of military discipline that bordered on excessive. But he also noticed something else. The human soldiers cared. When assembly troops made mistakes, the humans patiently retrained them. When civilian evacuations faced problems, human crews worked extra shifts to help. When species complained about the food or accommodations on human ships, changes were made immediately. One day he mentioned this to Pilot Hyon, a young human fighter commander who had become something like a friend. They were in the hangar of a human carrier, watching maintenance crews service the strange aircraft that could move through time. "Your people don't act like conquerors," Deho said carefully. "You act like you actually care what happens to us." Jan looked at him with surprise. "Of course we care. Why would we go to all this trouble if we didn't?" "Power," Deho suggested. "Control. Strategic advantage," Hien shook his head. "We already have power and control if we want them. We could have stayed hidden and let the Vrex destroy you all. Then we'd have the whole galaxy to ourselves. But that's not what we want." "Then what do you want?" Hien thought for a moment. "My grandmother has a saying. She lived through the early years when Earth was making the decision to stay quiet. She said they chose silence because they were afraid. Afraid of what would happen to us, yes, but also afraid of what we might become. She said that power without purpose turns people into monsters. So we spent 250 years figuring out our purpose." "And what did you decide?" Deho asked. "That we wanted to be the kind of species that builds shelters, not just weapons. That fights to protect, not to conquer. That stays quiet until we had something worth saying." Hyon smiled. "My grandmother also says that the first words you speak define how people see you. We wanted our first words to the galaxy to be, 'We heard you and we're coming to help.'" A week later, the defensive preparations were tested. A Vrex scout force, much smaller than the one at Kepler but still substantial, attacked a mining station on the outer rim. It was exactly what General Tajin had predicted. The station had been evacuated days before, but assembly forces engaged the Vrex using conventional weapons. They fought well but struggled. The Vrex adapted quickly, just like they always did. Assembly commanders requested permission to use human technology. Tajin denied it. "Not yet. We need them to think they understand our capabilities. Let them adapt to the wrong threat." It was hard to watch. The battle lasted 3 days. Assembly forces lost dozens of ships, but eventually they drove the Vrex back, and the scout force retreated to rejoin their main fleet. "We could have ended that in hours," Admiral Salmon said to Ambassador Hiyori after the battle. "We could have saved those ships." "But then the Vrex would know what to expect when they attack the core worlds," Hiyori replied. She was beginning to understand how the humans thought. "You're playing a long game." "War isn't about winning individual battles," Soman said. "It's about winning the final battle. And to do that, we need the enemy confident and unprepared." As the months passed, Deho watched the relationship between humans and assembly species slowly change. At first there was suspicion and resentment, but gradually respect developed. The humans never claimed to be superior, even though everyone knew they were. They asked for opinions, listened to concerns, and adjusted plans when assembly commanders raised valid objections. More importantly, they kept their promises. Every evacuation was completed on schedule. Every defensive installation was built to specification. Every technology they agreed to share was delivered without restrictions or hidden conditions. Dr. Bora spent those months studying human biology and psychology. She interviewed soldiers, engineers, and civilians. What she found contradicted her expectations. Despite their technological advancement, humans weren't emotionally detached or coldly logical. They formed strong bonds with each other, laughed at stupid jokes, and got upset when things went wrong. "They're not post-biological super beings," she reported to the council. "They're just people who happen to focus their entire civilization on advancement for a few centuries. They still feel fear, hope, anger, joy. They're not better than us in any fundamental way. They're just better prepared. One evening, Deho found himself in the human flagship's observation lounge with several other assembly officers. They were sharing drinks and stories, something that had become common as the species learned to work together. Pilot Hyun was there, along with Captain Minho and a human engineer named Jae-won, who had designed much of Earth's reality manipulation technology. Jae-won was quiet and thoughtful, but he had a dry sense of humor that emerged after a few drinks. "Can I ask you something?" Deho said to the group. "When you were hiding for all those years, didn't you get lonely? Didn't you want to meet other species, explore the galaxy, make friends?" The humans exchanged glances. Captain Minho answered, "Every day. Especially the younger generations who grew up knowing there was a whole galaxy out there that they couldn't visit. It was hard. Sometimes it felt like a prison. Then why stay hidden?" Another assembly officer asked. "Because loneliness is temporary," Jae-won said softly. "Extinction is permanent. We chose temporary loneliness over permanent destruction." "But you built Project Sanctuary," Deho pointed out. "You are planning to save all of us even while hiding from us." "Why?" "Because we're human," Hyun said simply. "We can't help ourselves. Even when we're afraid, even when we're hiding, we still want to help. It's probably a weakness, honestly. A rational species would have just focused on their own survival." "I don't think it's a weakness," Deho said quietly. "I think it's the most human thing about you." With 1 month remaining before the predicted Vrek's arrival, General Taejin called a final strategy meeting. The defensive network was complete. Every ship was in position. Every weapon was charged. Every civilian was safely evacuated from the danger zones. "They'll be here soon," Taejin said, studying the deep space sensors. "The main fleet is massive. Over 100,000 ships, maybe more. They'll hit us with everything they have." "Can we win?" Ambassador Hayori asked. Taejin looked at Admiral Soman, who nodded slightly. "Yes," he said. "But the victory will be expensive. We'll save most of the core worlds, but we'll lose ships. We'll lose people. War always has a cost, then why fight?" Someone asked. "If you have Project Sanctuary, you could evacuate everyone and let the Vreks have the galaxy." "No," Soman said firmly. "Running away just moves the problem. The Vreks will keep consuming, keep spreading. Eventually they'll fill the entire universe if nobody stops them. This ends here now." She pulled up a holographic display showing the final battle plan. It was complicated, involving multiple phases and fallback positions. But at its core was a simple idea. The Vreks arrived like a dark wave spreading across the stars. Their fleet was even larger than predicted. Over 150,000 bioships moving in perfect coordination. Each vessel was a living thing, pulsing with hungry consciousness. Together they formed a mind so vast it could be felt across light years, a presence of pure consumption pressing against reality itself. Admiral Soman stood on the bridge of the Indomitable, watching the enemy approach. Around her, the combined fleet of Earth and the Galactic Assembly waited in formation. Thousands of ships, hundreds of species, all united against the coming darkness. "They're splitting into attack groups," Captain Minho reported from Tactical. 12 major formations, each targeting a different core world. Just like General Taejin predicted. "Assembly forces, prepare to engage as planned," Soman broadcast across all channels. "Remember your training. Trust your human advisors, and know that no matter what happens in the next few hours, you've already proven your courage just by being here." Commander Deho listened to her words from his ship's bridge. His crew was a mix of his own species and humans working together. Pilot Hyun's fighter squadron was attached to his vessel, ready to deploy at his command. He had never felt more ready for battle or more afraid. The Vreks opened fire first. Beams of bioenergy lanced across space, striking assembly defensive positions. Ships exploded. Shields failed. The ancient enemy attacked with the same tactics they had used for millennia. Overwhelming force applied without mercy or hesitation. Assembly forces returned fire using conventional weapons. Missiles, energy beams, kinetic projectiles. Everything in the standard galactic arsenal. Ships on both sides started dying. The battle became chaos within minutes, just like every battle against the Vreks in history. But this time was different. This time humanity was watching. "They're adapting to our weapons," Deho reported to his human tactical advisor. "Shield frequencies changing, armor compensating. Give it another 10 minutes and our weapons will be mostly ineffective." "Confirmed," the human replied calmly. "The Vreks are following their standard adaptation pattern. General Tajin says to hold conventional weapons fire for another 5 minutes, then switch to human technology on his mark. Those 5 minutes felt like forever. Daeho watched assembly ships fighting and dying, following a plan that required them to appear weaker than they actually were. It went against every instinct, but he trusted the humans knew what they were doing. The Vrex pressed their advantage, sending more ships forward. Their formations grew bolder, coming closer to the core worlds. Their collective consciousness broadcast triumph across every frequency. Victory was near. Then General Tajin gave the order. All ships activate protocol silence. Show them what we really brought to this fight. Space itself seemed to change. Every assembly ship suddenly had access to technology that shouldn't exist. Temporal shields that made them exist slightly out of phase with normal time. Weapons that fired causality itself as ammunition. Reality anchors that prevented the Vrex from adapting their biology. The Vrex advance stopped. Suddenly, ships that had been easy targets became impossible to hit. Weapons that should have been adapted against started erasing Vrex vessels from existence. The tide of battle reversed in seconds. But the Vrex were not easily defeated. Their collective intelligence was vast, capable of processing millions of tactical variations simultaneously. They began to adapt to the human technology, finding weaknesses, testing limits. They're learning faster than expected, Captain Minho reported. Estimate 40 minutes before they can effectively counter our weapons. Then we move to Phase 2, Admiral Soman said calmly. She activated a communication channel that reached across dimensions, touching something the assembly didn't even know existed. Earth Defense Command, activate the solar array. Back in Earth's solar system, humanity's 250 years of preparation revealed its full scope. The moon split open completely, revealing weapons platforms that had been built into its core. Mars unfolded like a mechanical flower, exposing shipyards and production facilities. The asteroid belt lit up as thousands of hidden stations powered on. And the sun itself became a weapon. Massive collectors positioned around Earth's star began harvesting energy on a scale that defied belief. That energy flowed through dimensional channels directly to the battlefield, powering weapons that operated on principles the assembly had never imagined. Human ships began firing beams that looked like concentrated starlight. Where they struck Vrex vessels, the bioships didn't explode or burn. They simply stopped being alive. Not dead, not destroyed, just converted instantly to inert matter, unable to regenerate or adapt. What is that? Daeho asked in awe. Life-state inverters, his human advisor explained. They flip the quantum signature that defines something as alive. It's permanent and instant. The Vrex can't adapt to it because there's nothing to adapt to. They're just not alive anymore. The Vrex fleet began to retreat, but Admiral Soman had expected that. All ships deploy containment fields. Don't let a single one escape. Human vessels had been positioned specifically for this moment. They activated the same technology that had been used at Kepler 442b, creating a massive cage of folded space around the battlefield. The Vrex were trapped, but the Vrex overmind was desperate. It tried something new, something the collective consciousness had never attempted before. It reached out to human ships trying to communicate. The message came through on every channel, a voice made of billions of minds speaking as one. Stop, please stop. We surrender. The entire fleet, human and assembly alike, paused. The Vrex had never surrendered before. In thousands of years of galactic history, they had only consumed or been destroyed. This was something new. It's a trick, someone broadcast across the command channel. The Vrex don't surrender. They're buying time to adapt. But Admiral Soman was listening to something else. Human scientists had developed technology to interface with collective consciousnesses. Engineer Jaewon had designed it specifically for this moment. Soman could hear the Vrex overmind's thoughts, feel its emotions, and what she felt was genuine terror. Hold fire, she ordered. All ships, cease offensive operations but maintain containment. Jaewon, open a communication link to the overmind. Let's hear what they have to say. The connection formed, allowing direct mind-to-mind communication between Admiral Somin and the Vrex collective consciousness. What she learned in those moments would change everything. The Vrex were ancient, older than any assembly species. They had once been peaceful, living on worlds in a distant galaxy, but something had come for them. An enemy so terrible they had no name for it. Something that consumed entire galaxies, leaving only void behind. The Vrex had fled, transforming themselves into the swarm to survive. They consumed other species not from evil, but from desperation, converting everything they found into more of themselves to have strength in numbers. They had been running for so long they had forgotten what it was like to not be afraid. And now they were cornered, facing weapons they couldn't adapt to, trapped in a prison they couldn't escape. For the first time in millennia, the Vrex Overmind faced true extinction. And it was begging for mercy. Admiral Soman broadcast the Vrex's story across all channels so every ship could hear. The revelation spread through the combined fleet like a shockwave. The ancient enemy wasn't a force of nature or an expression of cosmic evil. They were refugees, victims fleeing something worse. What do we do? Ambassador Hayori asked. She was aboard the Indomitable, having insisted on being present for the final battle. Can we trust them? I can feel their sincerity, Soman said quietly. The Overmind isn't lying. They're genuinely asking for sanctuary. After they've killed billions of Assembly citizens over the centuries, someone demanded. After all the worlds they've consumed. Yes, Somin said firmly. Because if we destroy them now, we become exactly what we were afraid of becoming. A species that uses overwhelming power to eliminate threats instead of solving problems. We didn't spend 250 years preparing just to become conquerors who happened to win. She opened the channel to the Vrex Overmind again. We'll offer you sanctuary, a place to exist without needing to consume others. But you have to give up the swarm behavior. You have to stop consuming sentient species.
Can you do that?
The Overmind's response came slowly, processing this unprecedented offer. We need resources to survive. We need mass and energy. If we stop consuming, we die. We have dead galaxies, Jaywin said, joining the conversation. Regions of space with no life, just matter and energy. We can give you an entire galaxy cluster that's empty. You can consume all the non-living matter you want. You can have resources without harming anyone. There was a long pause. The Vrex Overmind was considering something it had never imagined possible. Peace. Safety. A place to exist without fear or hunger. Why would you do this? The Overmind asked. We have killed your people, destroyed your worlds. Why offer mercy? Admiral Soman smiled sadly. Because we understand fear. We understand what it's like to hide, to prepare for the worst, to assume everyone is a threat. We spent 250 years doing exactly that. But we learned that fear makes you do terrible things if you let it. We're offering you the chance to stop being afraid. The question is, will you take it?